Studio One is a fantastic software out of the gate, but here are some of the settings that I would change for a better experience. Okay, so for this, you will want to open up a Studio One session. A blank one will do just fine. And then head up to Studio One, Preferences, Advanced, and then let's start with the Editing tab. Now, the settings menu in Studio One can get really in-depth, so although I won't explain every single setting, what I have done is reset my copy of Studio One to the default settings, and in this video, I'll talk about the ones that I would change and why. So starting off with the Editing tab, on the first half here, the ones that I would engage are the Apply Folder Track Color to Content, Colorize Track Controls, and Show Channel Numbers in Tracks features. Apply Folder Track Color to Content will make it so that if you apply a color to a folder, any tracks that you drag into that folder will also take the color as well. This I found can be really useful if you like organized color-coded sessions like me. Speaking of color coding, the Colorize Track Controls option makes it so that any track that has a color gets the color applied to the entire track. Otherwise, the color will just be on a small vertical strip on the left. This option I like for aesthetic purposes, but it definitely also becomes useful when the sessions start to become larger because easy to spot colors also make it easy to spot different track types. Finally, the Show Channel Numbers and Tracks option makes it so that your channel numbers and the track numbers all coincide. Remember that in Studio One, tracks in the Arrange view and channels on the console are not always matched up. A good example of this would be with effects or bus channels that populate in the console and not in the Arrange view by default. Because of this, Studio One assigns track and channel numbers separately to avoid any gaps in the numbering. So then with a few extra channels in the console changing up the track order, ultimately this might result in a track having one number in the Arrange view and a different number in the console. If this bothers you and you wish to have your track number linked to its respective channel in the console so that everything is synced, then this is the option that you want to click. Towards the bottom here, the only option that I would change is the Draw Smooth Waveforms. I can't remember if this one is turned on or off by default, but this will make it so that when you are zooming into your audio to make surgical details, that the waveforms retain a smooth visual render, which can help with the editing itself. The one thing to note here though is that this does use your computer's graphic card, so if you're experiencing issues, then maybe consider turning this off. Okay, so now let's move on to the Automation tab, and here the only thing that I would consider engaging is the very last option titled Mute. In Studio One, whenever you add a track, it automatically comes with two automation envelopes, one for volume and one for panning. Checking this last option off would make it so that every track now comes with 3 instead of 2, the third one being a mute envelope. Now, in my workflow, typically to mute parts of a song, I just simply delete that event, but this option can also be useful in certain scenarios, so why not have it on? Next is the Audio tab, but before we dive into that, if you are enjoying this video, do me a huge favor and hit that like button and maybe consider subscribing if you haven't already. Both are free and would really help me out, so that would mean a lot. Speaking of free, I have linked a free Studio One macro toolbar for you right under the like button. This is a toolbar that sits at the top of your Arrange view and combines a bunch of Studio One's production functions into time-saving one-click buttons. Again, the toolbar is completely free, so click the first link down below to get access and start leveling up your Studio One workflow today. Moving on to the Audio tab, here again, there is not much to change, but the one option that I would definitely engage is the last one titled Pre-Record Audio Input. This is a magical feature in my opinion because it makes it so that when you press record, Studio One actually captures any audio before it actually starts to record for the designated number of seconds that you set here. So for example, if I leave this how it is and I turn it on, the next time that I press record, Studio One will also capture 5 seconds before the record starts. This feature can be super helpful for a ton of cases, but my favorite is for capturing pickup notes that fall outside of beat 1. Moving on to the MIDI section, here again, the only thing that I would engage is the Reveal Pre-Count Notes feature. This one is similar to the last one from the audio section, but for MIDI. Specifically, this feature makes it so that if you have pre-count on, which is a feature that performs a count before Studio One starts to record, that any MIDI notes played during that count also get recorded. Again, this can be really helpful for catching any pickup notes. Now, I believe that retrospective recording and chase long notes are enabled by default, but definitely also keep these on if they're not already. Retrospective recording makes it so that Studio One remembers and records any MIDI notes in the background without you having to press record, and then allows you to recall those notes at your command. Chase long notes is also helpful because usually MIDI notes will only play if you start playback at the beginning of the notes, but this makes it so that you can play any MIDI notes from anywhere. Okay, so the last tab that we'll cover today is the console, and in the first area, I would engage Enable Undo, colorize channel strips, and colorize plugin header. I can't remember if this is off by default, but enable undo makes it so that if you make a mistake in the console, that you can undo it by pressing Command or Control Z. Now, much like in the arrange view, colorize channel strips will make it so that if you assign a color, the entire channel strip will also get the color and not just the bottom horizontal bar. Again, super helpful for identifying channels. The last option in this area is purely aesthetic, but colorize plugin header will make it so that the horizontal bar at the top of any plugin will also take the color of whatever channel it is on. Moving down to the second section here, I would leave fader mode to touch, and all this means is that to move any fader, you actually have to click and drag the fader to where you want it to go. The other option here is jump, which allows you to click anywhere on the fader track to have the fader jump to that area, but that doesn't give you as much control in my opinion, so I like to leave mine at touch. As for the plugin menu goes, definitely set this to advanced. Basic is okay, but it lacks a ton of the additional viewing options for your plugins. On top of that, setting it to advanced also makes the plugin menu mirror the browser so you can have a unified experience all throughout. When you're done with this, move down to the third section. Here, I like to check off the first three options. The first two, which are audio input follow selection and instrument input follow selection, will make it so that any audio or instrument track that you click on will automatically also be record enabled. Studio One will never record unless you tell it to, but I find this option just saves me a step in the case that I do need to do more recording to a pre-existing track. The third option here, titled solo follow selection, is really cool in my opinion because it makes it so that if you solo a track and then click on another track, that second track now becomes a solo track. This is useful for a bunch of different things, but I find it specifically handy whenever I'm trying to compare two sounds. Now, if you're saying to yourself, yeah, but what if I want to solo multiple tracks? Well, in that case, you can just click on the actual solo symbol for that track and you're good to go. The best part is that even with this feature on, any solo tracks retain their solo status until you remove it. Okay, so the very last feature that I would turn on is the instrument track monitoring follows record, which is located here at the bottom. And this makes it so that whenever you record engage an instrument track, it also automatically engages the monitoring. For audio, I don't like to turn this on because oftentimes it is much better to use your audio interface's direct monitoring, which will give you a lot less latency. But for MIDI instruments, it is crucial because if you don't turn this on, then you won't be able to hear the sound. Now, obviously, there are a ton more settings in Studio One, but these are the ones that I would change if I was starting over and I wanted to enhance my experience. Hopefully they make your music journey easier and help you finish more music, and once you do, maybe consider distributing it with today's video sponsor, DistroKid. DistroKid is a super affordable music distribution service that allows you to distribute your music to all major streaming platforms like Apple Music, Spotify, Instagram, and TikTok for as low as $23 a year for unlimited uploads. Once you join, you also get access to a ton of their included features, like their free artist landing page that allows you to create an online profile that you can customize with your most important links and then place anywhere on your social media accounts. They also have a ton of other free tools to help you spread your music, like the playlist Spotlight and the Wheel of Playlists, which help get your music placed on one of their Spotify playlists. So then if you're ready to start distributing your music, then sign up for DistroKid today and get 7% off your first year with the link down below. Now, as mentioned, there is a ton more to explore in Studio One. So if you want to learn about some really cool folder tricks to increase your productivity, then click this video right over here.